Hello and welcome to today's presentation on academic integrity in the digital classroom. My name is GC Thompson and I'm one of the Student Conduct Administrators for the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development, also known as SCED. The information covered in today's presentation will help provide information and strategies to promote academic integrity within the digital classroom. Today's presentation will focus on the following topics: a quick recap of the university's academic integrity policy, including how to address academic dishonesty when it occurs in the classroom and how to report the incident to the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development per the requirements of the policy, the SCED process and what happens once you file a report with the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development, online tutoring sites such as Chegg, Course Hero, Quizlet, and Bartleby, and finally, some tips, tricks, and best practices for prevention, especially in the online learning environment. This next slide will talk about the university's academic integrity policy and how that policy defines acts of cheating and plagiarism. The Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development has seen all of these show up in one way or another. So copying in part or in whole from another's test or other evaluation instrument, submitting work previously graded in another course unless approved, altering or interfering with the grading process, or any other act committed which defrauds or misrepresents. So, for example, using or consulting sources or materials not authorized by the instructor. An example of that would be if two students are texting each other during an online exam, or if two students call each other to talk about an exam while completing that exam. That is, both of those examples are actually true examples that the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development has seen. For plagiarism, students do struggle with plagiarism and they sometimes do not understand that failing to paraphrase and use citations correctly can constitute plagiarism. So resources that might be helpful to suggest for students to get additional practice are available from both the Writing Center as well as the MLK Library. The MLK Library actually has really helpful tutorials on paraphrasing, and SCED has often assigned students to complete this tutorial if they have visited our office for plagiarism and they need to get some more practice in around citation and paraphrasing. So that's a little bit about our university policy on academic integrity. So what are the action steps that you might need to take if academic dishonesty occurs in your classroom? The first thing to do is make sure to have evidence of the misconduct. So, for example, having a photo of your exam question uploaded to Chegg, or having two tests from two students highlighting the identical or similar structure that they've used to come up with their solution to a problem. Or lastly, the similarity index that comes from turnitin.com on a written assignment. All of these examples of evidence are not only required, but they can really aid in your conversations with students. Something to note is that the university uses the preponderance of evidence standard. So simply put, that's the more likely than not greater weight of the evidence standard to adjudicate cases. The second thing that you'll want to do is to confront the student prior to taking action. So really have a conversation with that student and explain your reason for action, why you're going to report them to the Office of Student Conduct and why you're taking action within the classroom. It's really important to have a conversation about the significance of academic integrity and honesty and how that impacts not only their educational process, but the educational process of the institution as a whole. You'll also want to talk to them about the misconduct process and how the process for addressing academic dishonesty in the classroom is different from how the process is handled with the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development. Those two processes are different, and students sometimes don't understand that action that's been taken in the classroom is the action that's been taken. And then when they come to the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development, it's a completely separate process. So you'll want to have that conversation with them and be transparent about that process. Lastly, do talk to them about the possible decision outcomes that can be applied. So again, that's the academic sanctions versus the administrative sanctions. Really, transparency is key in this process. So again, on the topic of the academic and administrative process, academic sanctions can't be applied until a report has been filed with SCED. So after you've had that conversation with the student and you've applied the academic sanctions and then you submit that report to the Office of Student Conduct, the academic sanctions cannot be applied until that report comes to us. So once that report does come to the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development, no further sanctions may be applied to the case. So that's why we really emphasize having that transparent conversation with your students. Upon filing that report with SCED, SCED's action will be directed by the instructor. And so what I mean by that is that the instructor chooses how that report is processed. So for example, if SCED receives a report for tracking purposes only, this means that you, as the instructor, are making SCED aware that academic dishonesty has occurred in the classroom, academic sanctions have been applied to the student, and SCED will maintain a record of that case. Unless there's been a second instance of academic dishonesty of which you may not be aware, SCED will send the student a letter notifying them that we've received a report and that we're applying an administrative warning to the student. However, this differs if an instructor sends us a report for administrative review. So if we receive a report that says additional administrative sanctions, then SCED will notify the student that a report has been filed for review and that will invite that student to schedule a meeting with their office for an educational discussion regarding the misconduct. In every case, the instructor will receive notification that we received their report and that we are taking action on the report. Once the case has been adjudicated, we will also send a notification to the instructor letting them know that the case has been adjudicated. This next slide breaks down the difference between academic sanctions and administrative sanctions. So possible sanctions within the classroom are that a student can be reprimanded orally, failed on the evaluation instrument, so that might be a paper or an exam, or you may reduce their course grade or fail the student altogether. Administratively, the sanctions look a little different. So these are educational and remedial sanctions, disciplinary probation, suspension, and expulsion. So I'll explain a little bit about what each of these mean and how they impact our students. So educational and remedial sanctions are sanctions that are developmental and educational. So, for example, a student found responsible may be assigned a reflection essay describing what they've learned as a result of the incident and our conversation. Or we may assign them a workshop that addresses plagiarism and paraphrasing that's available from the MLK library. Sometimes a student may share with us that time management was the reason why they felt tempted to engage in academic dishonesty in the classroom. So in that case, we may assign that student a workshop to practice some time management skills and develop strategies that will aid them in the future. So those are some examples of educational and remedial sanctions that we may assign a student. Disciplinary probation, however, is a sanction that is a step above a written warning. And we typically do assign, for academic dishonesty that occurs in the classroom. So it's important to know that if a student is placed on disciplinary probation, it's a notation that appears on their transcript for the period that has been assigned. So for example, if a student is placed on disciplinary probation for 6 months to a year, then that notation will appear on the transcripts for either 6 months or a year. Once the period of disciplinary probation expires, then that notation will drop off the transcript. Something else to know about disciplinary probation is that disciplinary probation precludes a student from serving in a leadership role. So if a student wants to run for Associated Students, for example, or if they want to be an RA or an orientation leader, the student may apply for that position, but they may not be eligible per the requirements of the position. Finally, one last note on disciplinary probation is that if a student is placed on disciplinary probation, it means that they are not in good standing with the university. It doesn't mean that they are on academic probation, as academic probation is different than disciplinary probation. Many times students will get those two confused, but it's important to understand that disciplinary probation is not the same as academic probation. And lastly, suspension and expulsion, of course, is another possible sanction outcome that, per Executive Order 1098, falls within the scope of SCED. So I do want to say that the aim of the office is to be educational and remedial when students are referred to our office. Therefore, suspension and expulsion is reserved for very serious incidents of academic dishonesty. The first example that I can think of is a student who plagiarized their master's level thesis. The outcome of that case was that the student was expelled from the university. Or another case where a student had her significant other complete 3 years of her online coursework. Um, that was another situation that resulted in a student being expelled from the university. Lastly, a case where a student has been suspended for academic dishonesty is where they obtained a graded test, erased a graded test that was not theirs, erased the work on that test, and submitted it or attempted to submit that test to their instructors, claiming that this was their original test in an attempt to get a higher grade. What that student didn't know is that the instructor had scanned all of their tests prior to handing back the hard copies. So the instructor was able to send us the copy of the test, the original test that that student took, showing their real grade versus what the student turned in and attempted to show was their actual test. So that is a case that resulted in suspension. So again, you'll see that our aim is really to be educational and remedial first, and that suspension and expulsion is reserved for very severe cases. Our typical baseline for academic dishonesty is that disciplinary probation and educational and remedial sanctions. So really a workshop or a reflection essay. So what is the SCED process and what happens when you file a report with the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development? This next slide shows a workflow of what the SCED process actually looks like. So when an instructor files a report for additional administrative sanctions, what we will do is we will send a letter to that student that's called a notice of conference. Basically, in that letter, it asks that the student schedule a meeting with the student conduct administrator that has sent them that notice of conference to discuss the academic dishonesty that's occurred in the classroom. Once we have that educational conversation with the student, then we'll send the proposed resolution agreement letter. And that proposed resolution agreement letter will describe the incident. It will show the charges that the student has been found in violation of, and then it'll include the administrative sanctions that we've assigned. So that's the place where we will show that we are proposing the disciplinary probation and a reflection paper, for example. If the student accepts the proposed resolution agreement letter, then they'll sign it and then they will complete the sanctions that have been assigned. Again, you'll receive a notice letting you know that the Office of Student Conduct has adjudicated the case at the conclusion of that process. However, if a student receives that proposed resolution agreement letter and they decide to request a hearing, which is their appeal, then the time to resolution for that case will take a little bit longer because the hearing will have to be scheduled, and then the hearing officer, which is an individual that is not the student conduct administrator but is another university staff member, will facilitate that hearing with the student and the student conduct administrator, and then submit a report to the vice president for student affairs. Once they submit that report to the Vice President for Student Affairs, the Vice President will issue a final decision on that case. So this next slide really breaks down the hearing timeline. So as you can see, per the Executive Order 1098, we require at least, or what the Executive Order requires is that at least 10 working days before a hearing can occur happen. So in that time, we are identifying a hearing officer and notifying the student of the hearing day and time. Once we get that hearing scheduled and the hearing occurs with the student, then the hearing officer has 10 working days to submit a recommendation to the Vice President of Student Affairs. And then lastly, once that vice president gets the report from the hearing officer, then they have 10 working days to make the final university decision. So as you can see, the entire process may take up to 2 months. So again, if a student were to request a hearing, then that's when the time to resolution of the case can take a little bit longer. So, online tutoring sites. We talked a little bit about examples of evidence to be included with your reports, and one of those examples included Chegg. So let's spend some time talking through these online tutoring sites and how they impact academic dishonesty. So these are some of the examples mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation. We talked a little bit about Chegg, Course Hero, Bartleby, Quizlet, and paper mills. So 123.com is an example of a paper mill that a student used to submit their reflection paper to the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development. Yes, a student plagiarized their reflection paper assigned by the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development. So that student received another notice for academic dishonesty and came right back to the Office of Student Conduct to have another conversation about academic dishonesty. So I wanted to spend some time sharing the formal processes that exist with Chegg as well as Course Hero. So these are the formal processes that are available on both of these websites. So you'll see that Chegg has their honor code listed here and how academic integrity or violations of the honor code can be addressed here, and how to submit a request to have content taken down if it appears on their website. And Course Hero also has a process. The reason that I wanted to bring this forward is to show that Chegg and Course Hero do have formal processes. For Chegg, in order for content to be taken down, they'll need a written request from the dean or student conduct and ethical development. So you'll see right here on the right-hand side that a letter has been submitted to Chegg requesting that specific content that specific content be removed from the website. So you'll see right here that there is a URL that's needed so that personnel at Chegg is aware of what content to look for to be able to take it down. So Chegg has really done a really good job of cooperating with these requests, and they do provide as much information as they can. So for example, in this letter, you'll also notice that in addition to the URL, it's been requested that they inform us of the IP address of the students that not only posted the answers, but the students that also viewed those answers. Many times we are able to get the email of the student who signed up for that account as well as a name. Other times we've not been as successful because students may sign up with a fake name. So in those cases, we're working with IT to be able to try and narrow down those IP addresses. And here's the website where you can see where the honor code policy is available. So that's Chegg. For Course Hero, it's a little bit different, but they will need the written request from a faculty member, or in other words, the content owner. So that means that that request does need to come from the content owner. When writing that request, a description of the content and the URL, much like Chegg, is also necessary. They'll also need the contact information of the faculty member and the specific line of, I have a good faith belief that use of the material in the manner complained of is not authorized by the copyright owner, its agent, or the law. Make sure to sign and date it, and then email it to this email right here. And right below, I have included also the website where this information appears on their website and what their formal process is. So really want to give a shout out to Dr. Jennifer Beckhoff of the Lucas College of Business, who's done tremendous work on this front with the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development to narrow down and develop these letters and process for addressing academic dishonesty as it occurs on these tutoring sites. Course Hero also has a takedown form on their website. It's a quick fill-in form that if you would like to visit their website and address the content that appears on Course Hero, you can fill in this form and you'll see that you can fill in who's been impacted. You'll be able to provide the URL, provide your contact information here, and then check this box that has that statement about good faith belief and the use of the material is not authorized by the copyright owner, its agent, or law. Again, just helpful information to show you that they do have a form available on their website as well, but that they do require a written request in order for content to be removed from the content owner. So, some tips and tricks as we navigate the online learning environment and promote academic integrity in the digital classroom. So, one way to encourage and promote academic integrity is to remind students of their responsibility for academic integrity by clarifying expectations. And what we mean is clarify course expectations by outlining the nature and scope of student collaboration in the course syllabi, for example. So, where is collaboration okay? Where is it not? Um, Proactive prevention is also something that is helpful in encouraging academic integrity and promoting it in the digital classroom. So in-person versus online instruction is, of course, different. So in person, you may provide multiple versions of an exam, assign seats, or have active proctoring going on in exams. You'll walk through a classroom to ensure that students are keeping their eyes on their own papers, but online it's different. So some things may still work, like providing multiple versions of the exam, but other things like active proctoring will not. So there are other campuses or colleagues that are talking about different strategies in the online learning environment. And so some of the things that have come up are to design questions that cannot be answered easily, for example, or an instructor here on this campus has started utilizing oral testing to have students, quote unquote, defend their work to make sure that they are able to critically think and form their arguments on their own. Or perhaps randomizing a test question and each student receives a different question might be a strategy to help prevent academic dishonesty in the classroom. Lastly, SurveyMonkey or Kahoot. Those are two services that have live polling. So perhaps this is a tool that might be an option to explore. And there are a host of other tools out there that might be great alternatives and may help with promoting academic integrity in the classroom, especially as we continue to educate our students in the online setting. Lastly, within the scope of prevention, Google your name and course content. It sounds a little silly, but Googling your name and course content will allow you to see if your content does appear on one of these online tutoring sites like Chegg, Course Hero, or Quizlet. And that could ensure that students don't use this content inappropriately if it does appear on these websites. And then you can also let student conduct and ethical development know, let your associate dean and chair know that you found your content online, and then we can start that process together to ensure that that content is taken down from these websites. Something else is timely reporting. So when that academic dishonesty occurs in the classroom, notify your department chair and associate dean and discuss the possible academic sanctions that you're thinking of assigning a student who is responsible for engaging in this act in the classroom. And lastly, complete the SCED dishonesty academic integrity reporting form. We've included the website down here below, as well as the path for where that report is. So once you navigate to our website here, the tab you'll click is faculty and staff, and then reporting. And it'll take you to that reporting form so that you can quickly submit the incident description, the student, and examples of evidence that will help with adjudication of the case. Finally, if you do have any questions or comments or any cases that you would like to consult with the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development, please feel free to contact us at this email right down here. We're happy to talk through any cases or questions that you may have. And if there's anything else that comes up following this presentation that any burning questions, we're happy to provide guidance around those questions. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for this presentation on academic integrity in the digital classroom. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope this presentation provided you with some tips and strategies for promoting academic integrity in the online learning environment. Thank you.